Healing does not happen through shame. You cannot shame yourself into change. You cannot criticize yourself into peace. You cannot force your way out of patterns your body learned to survive. Healing happens through understanding, through learning what your mind has been doing, what your body has been carrying, and how your spirit was never meant to do this alone. Because real healing is not one-dimensional. It's not just mindset. It's not just behavior. It's not just faith. It's all three working together. Mind, body, spirit. And when those are out of alignment, you feel it. But when they begin working together again, everything starts to shift. Welcome to Untrapped, a podcast for those learning to live free from fear, free from pain, and free from the weight of the past. I'm your host, Elizabeth Meigs, certified trauma-informed practitioner, transformational coach and speaker, founder of Elizabeth Inspires, and messenger of God's miracle power. Here, we don't ignore trauma and chronic stress. We understand it. We regulate it. And we invite God into the healing process. Each episode, we walk through healing, hope, and resilient faith together. So take a breath. Let your body settle. And let's rise into today's message. One of the biggest lies people carry after trauma is this: something must be wrong with me. They feel reactions that they don't understand. Anger, panic, shutting down, trying to keep everyone else happy. And the shame that follows those reactions, that can be heavy. But what if those reactions were never proof that you are broken? What if they were evidence that your mind and body were trying to protect you? Today, we're talking about the 4 trauma responses: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, and how understanding them can begin removing the shame many people carry. We'll be anchoring this truth in Isaiah 41:10, where God reminds us that you have nothing to fear, for He is with you. And He says, I will strengthen you and help you. Let me explain this simply. Your brain has one main job: to protect you. Not make you calm, not make you polite, not make you logical, but to protect you. Deep inside your brain is a system that is constantly scanning your environment. It watches for tone of voice, facial expressions, body language, conflict, even stress. And when it thinks something is unsafe, it reacts before you have time to think. That's why trauma responses often feel automatic. You didn't plan them. Your body reacted. Not because you're weak, but because you survived. And God designed your brain with survival systems for a reason. Unfortunately, sometimes these systems stay turned on longer than they were meant to. That's when people start asking, why can't I control my reactions? And the truth is, you are not crazy. Your nervous system learned patterns of protection. The fight response says, if I push back, I might be safe. Fight can look like anger, defensiveness, sharp responses, emotional outbursts, or reacting faster than you meant to. And here's the part people don't talk about enough. Many people who experience fight responses feel deep shame afterward. They don't just feel the emotion, they begin judging themselves for it. But that anger doesn't come out of nowhere. It often comes from overload, pressure that has been building for far too long. That was true for me. After my brain injury, I was trying to function like everything was normal. I went to therapy. I showed up at school. I did the assignments. I did everything I was supposed to do. From the outside, it looked like I was holding it together. But on the inside, I wasn't. There was confusion. There was pressure. There were thoughts that I just didn't understand. And I didn't have the words for any of it. By the time I got home, everything I had been holding in all day had nowhere else to go. And it came out. Sometimes it came out as anger. Sometimes it came out in tears. A lot of times, it was both at the same time. And I remember not understanding it. I remember thinking, why am I reacting like this? But what I didn't realize at the time was even deeper than that. The story I had started telling myself was this: I'm a mistake. I'm a failure. This must be punishment for something I did wrong. That's what made it heavier. Because now it wasn't just the reaction. It was the meaning and the belief that I attached to it. My family didn't understand my reactions. But the truth is, neither did I. And that's a hard place to be. They loved me. They wanted to help me. They were doing everything they could. But they didn't know what I needed. And I didn't know how to explain it. So they supported me the best they could, while feeling completely helpless. And I could feel that too, which only added more pressure, more emotion, more buildup, and eventually, more release. That's what the fight response can look like. Not someone who is too much, but someone who has been holding too much for far too long. And their nervous system finally says, I can't carry this quietly anymore. So it comes out loud. And for others, instead of that pressure coming out, it goes in a completely different direction. They don't push back. They run. The flight response says, if I stay busy, I don't have to feel this. Flight doesn't always look like running away. Sometimes it looks like productivity, constant busyness, overworking, feeling every space in your schedule, avoiding difficult conversations, keeping your mind occupied so you don't have to slow down long enough to feel what's underneath the emptiness. And this one can be hard to recognize because the world rewards it. It looks responsible. It looks driven. It looks strong. But underneath all of that, it can be a nervous system trying to escape pain. I recognized this pattern in my own life later on. There was a season where I poured everything into what I was building, my ministry, my calling, the way I knew I was meant to help others. And on the surface, it looked like purpose, and it was. But there was something deeper happening underneath it too. Part of me felt like I had to prove something. Like I had to show that what I was doing had value. That it mattered. Because in my environment at that time, purpose wasn't seen the way I understood it, the way I knew it to be. It was measured by something else, by results, by income, by what could be validated externally. So I stayed busy. Not just because I was called, but because it felt like the only way to keep the peace. And if I slowed down, everything I had been trying to outrun started catching up to me. Feelings that I didn't want to face. The sense of rejection, judgment, the same emotions I had experienced 2 decades earlier during my recovery. Sadness, confusion, loneliness, emptiness. And underneath it all, that familiar ache of not being understood. So I kept going. I stayed productive. I stayed focused. Because as long as I was moving, I didn't have to sit in that pain. And here's what made it even harder to recognize. From the outside, it looked like I was doing everything right. It looked like I was being productive. It looked like I was building something meaningful. But there was also pressure, unspoken expectations, a constant evaluation of what I was accomplishing and whether or not it was enough. And when you're in that environment long enough, you start measuring yourself the same way. You start asking, did I do enough today? Was it valuable enough? Was it enough to be accepted? And if there were moments where I couldn't stay busy, my mind would go right back into questioning, trying to figure things out, trying to make sense of what didn't make sense, feeling that tension rise again, the uncertainty, the weight of not knowing how to fix something that I didn't fully understand. The only place I didn't feel that confusion was in my purpose. That part was clear. I knew who I was in Christ. I knew the calling on my life because I had been fulfilling it for more than a decade. Even when everything else felt uncertain, that truth lasted. It didn't move. But everything else around it felt unstable. And it wasn't until I was out of that environment, when I could finally breathe again, that I saw it clearly. I wasn't just being productive. I was avoiding pain, avoiding the heartache of feeling like I wasn't enough and I wasn't ever gonna be enough. Avoiding the pressure of trying to be what someone else needed me to be. And long term, that comes at a cost. Burnout, emotional exhaustion, losing yourself in the process of trying to meet expectations that you were never meant to carry. So, if you find yourself constantly striving, trying to be what someone else needs you to be just to feel valued, I want you to hear this clearly. That is not truth. That is a lie. You were never meant to fit into someone else's definition of who you should be. That's like trying to force a square peg into a round hole. It's never gonna fit. And the more you force it, the more it costs you. Your peace, your freedom, your ability to fully love yourself the way God already does. And I've seen this pattern not just in my life, but in others too. People working nonstop, providing, showing up, doing everything they can to hold things together. But underneath all of that, their value has become tied to what they produce, not who they are. And when your identity gets tied to performance, You never feel like you can stop, because stopping feels like losing your worth. But the truth is, that's not how God sees you. Your value was never meant to be earned. Freeze. It's different. Freeze says, if I shut down, I might be safe. And this one can be the most confusing, because it doesn't look like action. It looks like nothing. Brain fog, feeling numb, emptiness, difficulty making decisions, going quiet, feeling stuck. And people often label it the wrong way. They call it laziness. They call it lack of motivation. They call it weakness. But that's not what it is. When the nervous system becomes overwhelmed, it sometimes shuts down like a circuit breaker. Instead of reacting with energy like fight or flight, the brain conserves energy. This is not laziness. This is protection. I experienced this most deeply during my recovery after my brain injury. There were moments where my mind felt foggy, like I couldn't get it to work the way it used to. I couldn't think clearly. I couldn't process things the same. Even simple things felt overwhelming. And physically, I felt heavy. Like moving forward took more energy than I had. Sometimes it felt easier to just collapse, to stay in bed, to not move at all. I felt stuck. And in those moments, the thoughts that came with it were even heavier. I started believing things that weren't true. But at the time, they felt real. I'm a burden. I messed up my family's life. Everything would be better if I hadn't survived. And that's hard to say out loud. But it's real. That's where my mind would go. Back to that same belief. I'm a mistake. I'm a failure. I shouldn't be here. And I didn't understand why I felt that way. That was the hardest part. I was frustrated. I needed answers. I wanted to understand what was happening in my own mind, and I couldn't. When you don't understand what's happening inside you, it's easy to turn on yourself. I hated myself in those moments. Not because it was true, but because I didn't know what else to do with what I was feeling. And the truth is, no one around me fully understood it either. They loved me. They were trying, but they didn't know what I was experiencing internally. So I didn't always get what I needed. What I needed was time, space, understanding. But when that wasn't there, my system would shift again, sometimes back to flight, trying to move, trying to push through, trying to escape the feeling. But underneath it all, my brain was overwhelmed, emotionally exhausted, trying to process more than it had the capacity for at the time. So it just shut down. That's what freeze does. It protects you from overload. And sometimes these responses don't happen in isolation one at a time. They overlap. There were times I would go from fight to complete shutdown, exhausted from the emotional release. And there were other times I would go into Fawn, staying quiet, not saying anything at all, just to avoid making things worse. Because silence felt safer than conflict, especially in environments where speaking up felt like it would create more pain. But here's what I want you to hear clearly. If you've ever experienced this, you are not a failure. You are not a mistake. You're not lazy. You are not unmotivated. Your nervous system was overwhelmed. And it responded the only way it knew how to protect you. For me, things began to shift when I started seeing myself differently. When I began rediscovering who I was, what lit me up inside, what brought me back to life. It didn't happen overnight. It came through rebuilding, through learning how to see past the lies I had believed about myself, through reconnecting with truth, through choosing, little by little, not to agree with the voice that told me I was a mistake. And over time, the confusion began to lift. The shame started to loosen its grip because I realized something important. This wasn't who I was. This was what I had experienced. This was how my mind and body had learned to respond under pressure. And if it was learned, it could be unlearned. And what I didn't have the words for back then, I now understand. And I've watched others walk out of the same patterns too. And for some people, instead of shutting down or pushing through, their nervous system takes a different path. They adapt by keeping everyone else comfortable. Fawn says, if I keep everyone happy, I will be safe. This response often develops in environments where conflict feels dangerous, or where acceptance feels conditional. Fawn can look like people-pleasing, apologizing constantly, ignoring your own needs, trying to keep everyone else happy and calm, avoiding conflict at all costs. And for many people, this one doesn't even feel like a trauma response. It feels like this is who I am. But it's not who you are. It's what you learned. I first saw this pattern develop in my life after my brain injury. At that time, I was already carrying so much internally. Confusion, uncertainty, fear of being judged, fear of being rejected. And without realizing it, I started trying to make everything easier for everyone else. I tried to be easy to work with. I tried not to cause problems. I tried to keep things smooth. Because somewhere inside me, I believed if I don't make things harder, maybe I won't be rejected again. And underneath that, there was a deeper belief forming. My worth is what I can be for other people, not who I am. But what I can be for them, to fit their needs, to make them happy. That belief right there, that will keep you stuck. Because you will constantly adjust yourself to meet everyone else's expectations and slowly lose sight of your own. Later in my life, I saw that same pattern show up again in my marriage. And this time, it looked like avoiding conflict, staying quiet, not speaking up, trying to keep the peace, because part of me believed if I can just keep everything calm, then I'll be safe here. It was a compromise. And when you live in that pattern long enough, you start to feel responsible for everyone else's emotions. You start trying to manage the environment, anticipate reactions, keep things from escalating. But here's the truth. That's a heavy weight to carry. Because you were never meant to be responsible for everyone else's peace at the cost of your own. And internally, Fawn doesn't feel peaceful. It feels tense, like you're constantly scanning, what do they need? How do I keep this from going wrong? What do I need to say or not say to keep things okay? It's exhausting. And over time, you stop asking what you need altogether. Fawn and flight often work together. One part of you stays busy so you don't have to feel. Another part of you keeps everyone else comfortable so nothing explodes. Both are attempts to survive, but neither one allows you to fully be yourself. And if you find yourself living here, trying to be what everyone else needs so you can feel accepted, hear this clearly. Your value is not based on how well you manage other people's emotions. Your value is not based on how agreeable you are. Your value is not based on how much you sacrifice yourself to keep the peace. That's not love. That's survival. And it will cost you your voice, your identity, and your freedom if you stay there. You were never created to disappear so everyone else could feel comfortable. You were created with purpose, with identity, with a voice that matters. And learning to step out of Fawn is learning that it is safe to be who God created you to be, not who you had to become to survive. And when you step back and look at all four of these responses, fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, you start seeing something clearly. Something powerful happens when people learn about these trauma responses. They stop asking, what is wrong with me? And they start asking, what has my body been trying to protect me from? That shift changes everything. It becomes awareness. Because shame cannot survive where understanding is present. Shame thrives in confusion. It thrives in mislabeling. It thrives when you believe your reactions define you. But the moment you understand, you begin separating who you are from what you've experienced. I've seen this happen over and over again. One of my past clients was cycling between fight, fawn, and freeze. Their life felt like emotional chaos. One moment they were reacting. The next moment they were shutting down. Then trying to smooth everything over. And because they didn't understand it, they turned it inward. They questioned themselves constantly. At times, they genuinely wondered if they were losing their mind. But that wasn't the truth. Their nervous system was doing exactly what it had been trained to do. It was trying to survive. And when they began to understand that, something shifted. They stopped fighting themselves. They stopped labeling themselves as the problem. And for the first time, they could breathe. Because they realized, I'm not crazy. I'm responding to something real. And that awareness, that's where healing begins. My turning point came during a breakdown. I had been holding so much inside for so long, trying to push through, trying to make sense of things that didn't make any sense at all. Carrying questions that I didn't have answers to. And eventually, everything surfaced at once. There was no more holding it together. I needed answers. And I knew there was only one place that I could go to get them. The Creator. I knew that Jesus Christ was the only one who knew what I was suffering through, what I was enduring. I had to turn to God, the very one that I had started to believe was punishing me. And in that moment, everything shifted. Because instead of punishment, I encountered God's presence, Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit who lived in me immediately. Not gradually, not over time. In that moment, when I was broken and at my lowest. And it was overwhelming in a way that I didn't expect. Not overwhelming like fear. It was overwhelming peace, overwhelming comfort, and overwhelming love that didn't come from anything in this world. It met me right in the middle of that brokenness. It was everything that I needed at the time, everything that I felt like I didn't deserve. And it was stronger than every ounce of pain that I had been carrying, stronger than the heartache, stronger than the confusion, stronger than the lies that I had begun believing about myself. It didn't just meet me. It replaced what I was feeling. And in that moment, I knew something that I hadn't fully understood before. God was not punishing me. He was holding me. Isaiah 41:10 became real in a way I can't fully explain. Do not fear, for I am with you. Not when you get it together, not when you figure it out. Right there, in the middle of it. And something else began to shift too. The realization that I couldn't stop. Because if what I experienced in that moment, that peace, that comfort, that restoration, if that was available to me, then it was available to others too. And it could only come from God. From that point forward, that same presence didn't just show up once, it continued. Every time I felt like I was breaking again, every time I felt like I couldn't keep going, He would meet me once again with truth, with reassurance, with a reminder that there was a greater plan for my life. And that's how I kept going. Not because I had everything figured out. Not because I understood trauma or the nervous system at the time, but because I knew God was rebuilding something in me, piece by piece, long before I had a language for it. He was already doing the work. When you begin to understand both sides of this, what your body has been doing to protect you, and how God meets you in the middle of it, you start to see something powerful. Healing does not happen through shame. You cannot shame yourself into change. You cannot criticize yourself into peace. You cannot force your way out of patterns your body learned to survive. Healing happens through understanding, through learning what your mind has been doing, what your body has been carrying, and how your spirit was never meant to do this alone. Because real healing is not one-dimensional. It's not just mindset. It's not just behavior. It's not just faith. It's all three working together. Mind, body, spirit. And when those are out of alignment, you feel it. But when they begin working together again, everything starts to shift. This is the work I now teach through the Miracle Power Activation System. Not theory, not surface level strategies, but a process that meets you where you are and walks you forward step by step. It starts with the Pathway to Peace method, because before anything else can change, your system has to stabilize. Your body has to learn what safety feels like again. Then comes the roadmap to resilience. This is where identity is rebuilt, because trauma doesn't just affect your reactions, it distorts how you see yourself. And if you don't rebuild identity, you will keep returning to the same patterns. And then the Miracle Power Activation Framework. This is where everything comes together. Faith, identity, daily rhythms, not just moments of breakthrough, but a way of living that sustains it. Because healing is not about a single moment. It's about learning how to live differently, day by day, with truth, with awareness, with God at the center of it. This is not about forcing yourself to change. It's about retraining your mind, your body, and your spirit to work together again. If you have ever asked yourself, why am I like this? I want you to hear this clearly. You are not crazy. You are not weak. You are not broken. You adapted. Your nervous system learned how to survive. And that same nervous system can learn how to feel safe again with time, with truth, and with God. Isaiah 41:10 reminds us, "Do not fear, for I am with you. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you." You are not walking this journey alone. Not for a moment. Not in the confusion. Not in the overwhelm. Not in the healing. And if something in this episode spoke to you, don't ignore it. That awareness matters. Because awareness is where freedom begins. And you don't have to figure this out by yourself. If you want daily truth and encouragement, you can join my daily affirmations text subscription by visiting elizabethinspires.com under the resources tab. And if you're ready to go deeper, to move out of survival mode and into lasting peace, clarity, and purpose, you can learn more about the Miracle Power Activation System and book a discovery call. These links are available in the show notes. But before you go, remember this. You are not who you had to become to survive. You are who God created you to be. And don't ever forget that you hold the keys to unlocking your miracle power. Please join me in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we come to you today just as we are. Not with everything figured out. Not with everything put together. But with honesty. God, you see every person listening right now. You see the places where they feel overwhelmed. The moments they don't understand their own reactions. The weight they've been carrying in silence. And Lord, I ask right now that you meet them there, just like you met me. Not after they fix themselves, not after they get stronger, but right in the middle of where they are. God, where there has been confusion, bring clarity. Where there has been shame, replace it with your truth. Where they have believed they are broken, remind them they were protecting themselves the only way they knew how. Father, calm their nervous system. Let their body feel what safety feels like again. Remind them that they are not alone, that you are with them, strengthening them, helping them, upholding them just like your word promises. And God, for the person who feels stuck, the one who feels like they can't move forward, the one who feels like they've lost themselves, I ask you to begin restoring them piece by piece, truth by truth, step by step. Show them who they are in you, not who the pain told them they were, but who you created them to be. And give them the courage to take the next step. Not the whole journey, just the next step. God, we trust you with the process. We trust you with the healing. And we thank you that you are not finished with our story. In Jesus' precious name I pray. Amen. In the next episode, we are going to go into rebuilding trust. Not just trusting God, but learning how to trust yourself again. Trust your decisions. Trust your ability to move forward. Because trauma doesn't just dysregulate the nervous system. It breaks trust. And if trust is broken, people stay stuck, second guessing, overthinking, looking outside of themselves for answers, afraid to move forward. Walking by faith is not passive. It is intentional movement forward, even when you don't have full clarity. Faith is not the absence of fear. It is the movement forward despite it. I'll see you in the next episode.